In today's episode, Oz asks, there's still the ethical questions that my marketing friends avoid. Should Google even have all the data it collects on consumers? How ethical is it to use that data? What about pending legislation that would hopefully criminalize lots of common data acquisition methods? So there's a lot to unpack here, but fundamentally, the big technology companies have acquired data largely through us giving it to them, even if we're not aware of what it is they're doing or how they're doing it, and by aggregating data using all the different technology at their disposal. Should they have it? The off-the-cuff remark that I made when Oz asked this question on LinkedIn is that data collection is a lot like sex, in that if everyone is a willing and informed and competent partner and gives consent, then it's fine. It's where you run into trouble when you try and hide things, when you try and make your terms of service onerous, when you try and make data removal onerous, effectively withdrawing consent, that you get into, well, frankly, ethical violations. When you prevent somebody from willingly withdrawing consent, again, just like the sex analogy, that's a bad thing to do. I would hope that would be obvious to everybody, but obviously with a lot of the legislation that's happening, it's not. And marketers who are self-aware enough to realize that cooperating and respecting consumers' rights is in their long-term best interests, apparently are not as common as I would like to think. So I think there's two ways to deal with this today in which marketers can be more effective and mitigate risk. And unfortunately, there are going to be some bad apples that will ruin a lot of stuff. So we need to, again, prepare for that in advance. And so there's two ways of this: minimum viable data and behavior-based data. So let's tackle these. Minimum viable data means you do an analysis using the best technology available to you to figure out what variables actually matter to the outcome you care about, whether it's conversion, lead generation, e-commerce checkout. You're collecting all this data. We all are. And the question is any of it relevant? Does having somebody's age and weight and whatever have a mathematical relationship to the outcome that we care about? If the answer is no, we stop collecting it. Right? There's no reason to collect something that, if we can mathematically prove, has no relationship to the outcome we care about. There's no reason to collect that data. That data is a liability. That data is a lawsuit waiting to happen, because when, and I mean this seriously, when you are breached, and it will happen to every company at some point in some fashion, you want the minimum viable data there. It should be encrypted, but even if it wasn't, if it was only 2 or 3 data points as opposed to every piece of information on a consumer, your risk is lower. Right, so we want to run that analysis for minimum viable data. The second thing is to focus a lot more on behavior and a lot less on static information. A lot of marketers rely on things like demographic or firmographic data. You know, this person is 23 years old, they're Jewish, they're male, they live in this place. And again, if no one's actually done any analysis to prove that this data has relevance, we may just be acquiring a whole bunch of it for no reason. But more importantly, behavior matters a lot more than static data. The example I use all the time is My Little Pony, right? If you were a marketer and you think My Little Pony is something that girls 8 to 13 would collect, you're going to focus your marketing, focus your efforts. You're going to buy data for households that have that information. But if you focus on behavior, look at who buys this stuff. There's a whole segment of guys 26 to 40 who love this universe and have a way more disposable income than an 8-year-old. You would miss that. You would miss their very existence because you'd be so busy marketing to what you think the market is, as opposed to paying attention to people's data, to their behaviors, to what they do. Less about who they are, more about what is it that they do. How often are they browsing your website? What are they putting in their shopping carts, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to pivot as an industry away from buying identities and more towards paying attention to behaviors. Take your website. Does it actually matter? If you run the analysis in your own Google Analytics, does it actually matter that you know someone's age or gender or even topical preferences? If you've never done the analysis, you may or may not find it relevant. I know on my own website, it's a lot more important to know which pages somebody visits on the way to conversion than necessarily who they are. If I can remarket and retarget instead of towards an identity, if I can just remarket towards everybody who's visited the About Me page, because I know from a mathematical assessment that that is one of the top pages people visit before they convert. If I can do that, I'll get much better results than trying to market to only 35 to 43-year-old men. I want to focus on everybody who's been to that page because they all have the same intent. I don't care who you are. If your intent is you want to hire me to speak at your event, or you want to hire Trust Insights to fix your data problems, and this pattern of 3 pages that people visit is the pattern, I want to encourage you to go through that pattern. I want to change my navigation to encourage that pattern. I want to change my remarketing to encourage that pattern of behaviors. When you do stuff, particularly on properties that you own, you need to collect much less data. And you don't need to collect any identifying data. You just need to be able to say that person is following the behavioral pattern that we know leads to conversion. Let's keep encouraging them. Doesn't matter who it is. Wait for them to give information by filling out a form or whatever. And then respecting their privacy, respecting their data. Because, again, most of the time for most of these situations, we don't need a whole lot more than just basic contact information so that when the person fills out the form, we can get back in touch with them. That's about it. I don't need much else. Fundamentally, for a lot of the marketing that I do, I really need an email address and maybe a phone number. That's it. Not much else is proven statistically valid in the data that I was collecting. So there you have it. There's a lot more to unpack here because there is going to be a reckoning for marketing if marketing doesn't get its act together and figure out how to analyze the data it's collecting and then how to discard the data it doesn't need anymore. But a really good question. Imagine there'll be probably more follow-up questions in the comments, but please leave them here. And as always, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and the newsletter. I'll talk to you soon. Want help solving your company's data, analytics, and digital marketing problems? Visit trustinsights.ai today and let us know how we can help you.